instruction, or in other words, let's say, ensuring that instruction is inclusive for diverse learners. My name is Biladi Wasim, and I will be the moderator of this webinar. I'm a middle school teacher from Borj Ridge, and I'm truly excited to be hosting this session today. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Hicham Bendifallah, an academician in Czech Republic and in the UK. Hicham is the presenter of our webinar series, accompanied with his large experience in setting up and organizing webinars and conferences worldwide. So before I hand the mic over to Hicham, I have few housekeeping items to cover about this open discussions webinar. First, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session, and it is accessible through a link we will be sharing on Facebook groups, inshallah. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any question, feel free to speak it out, and the participant teachers, along with Hicham and myself, will answer or give details about it, inshallah. So before starting, just a few things you need to remember. First, make sure to mute yourselves during the webinar. Do this by clicking on the mute button. Also, make sure that you are in a quiet place. And feel free to ask questions or share your opinions after the end of each slide. That's all. Hicham, it's over to you.
Thank you, Wasim. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our 11th webinar, which is going to cover, as Wasim mentioned a while ago, the differentiated instruction module, part of ensuring the instruction that is an inclusive driver to diverse learners, all the abilities you've got in your classes. So today's agenda is going to cover the differentiated instruction as a normal module, then the maximization of the learning processes, later on the mixed abilities in its diversity of learning entities of the education modules, later on the inclusive teaching, what the inclusive teaching means, and what are the strategies that we as teachers are supposed to be using in order to make sure that our teaching is going to cover all the TIVs, all the abilities and all the competencies we've got in our classes, despite the level changes, despite the level frequencies we've got, but certainly some strategies are going to keep us really up to date into making sure that we've got a differentiated activity that really affiliates the whole tendencies of your classes. I'm joined as well by the work has been prepared by Wasim Belaidi. Thank you, Ibtisam Budpil and Boghlar Zainab. Thank you as well for helping to get out the information as per the during context. Well, as I've mentioned before, when it comes to the differentiated instruction, you as a teacher, you would sometimes be asking yourself, why do I use that, or what is that exactly? What is the role of using the differentiated instruction in the academic approach or in the pedagogical approach? The differentiated instruction actually is an approach in which the teachers, they adjust their curriculum, their instruction, just in order to maximize the learning of all the students you have in the class. And at the same time, you as a teacher are supposed to be adjusting the three main instructional elements, which are the content, which are the processes, and the products, from the contextual and the characteristics of the teaching TIVs. Well, these three characteristics, or these three elements of the learning processes, they are very, very important, and they should be considered as kind of a planning instruction in every single lesson you're going to teach those students, which means that you need to consider the readiness of your students, you need to consider the readiness or the understanding of the student's interest, the understanding of the student's motivation, and at the same time, the learning profiles. So one of the most important thing you need to make sure that you understand when applying a differentiated instruction into any of your modules is that you know about the learning profiles of your students. In addition to that, you as a teacher, you need to differentiate the instruction that you employ just as an ongoing assessment with the flexible grouping you're putting in your classes, with the flexible dividends you just need to put, suppose, let's say, being related or being instructed by your administration or by the curriculum or by your supervisor. So all over that, in most of these things, we are going to see how to vary the level of the content you present. So one of the things a teacher focuses on is that the variation of the level of the content you present to your students. I see someone else joining. Let me just get them through the lobby. Yes, Lombardi, I guess. Yeah, she's getting in. Okay, as I said, then the second thing is the providing the variety of the learning environment. You know, like we as teachers, it's really hard for us just to provide one environment of the students so that they can learn effectively. What about providing different environments? So this is one of the difficulties we as teachers might be facing, and every teacher who is supposed to teach a foreign language, who's supposed to teach mathematics, who is supposed to teach geography, they are supposed to be exposed to similar problems. Later on, the difference or the different ways where the students they can show they've learned. So which means that this is the reproduction rate after the production. This is actually what they do after they learned. Then the reproduction rate or the reproduction phase of these students is the way they show exactly what they have learned, what they have acquired, and the way they apply it in a way or in another. Just before I start getting into the details, I would like to ask if any one of you has got a question regarding the differentiated instruction without having mentioned the details. Any particular question that covers this topic?
Hi, it's Iman.
Hi, Iman. Go ahead, please.
I wanted to, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to understand what do you mean by learning environment, differentiating in learning environment, just to check if I have well understood it or not in my brain. Thank you.
Absolutely. When it comes to the differentiating or the differentiated environments of the learning, supposing that you're an elementary level, you're a secondary school teacher, you're teaching in the kindergarten. I give you examples of a teacher needs to make sure that there is a place at the class where the students can work very quietly, which means that not the place or a corner, but it's the atmosphere where the students need to work in a way without being distracted. As well as places, for example, where the students they can do their collaboration processes or their collaboration activities. And at the same time, another example which is extremely important when it comes to teaching aids, providing the materials, providing the reflection and the variety of the cultures and the homework pieces in the terms of settings to the students so that you can arrange for them the guidelines, you can arrange for them the matches of their own individual needs. I could give another example, which is, let's say, more or less not very practical, but as a teacher, if you don't develop or if you develop some routines that allow the students to get a help when the teachers are busy, for example, when the teachers they do not have time. So this is kind of an immediate process or a definite process that really gets the students involved in a way or in another with the teaching activity, but with some learning benefits.
Okay, thank you. Now it's clear.
Absolutely, thank you too. Anyone else, please? Okay, as I have already explained, the learning environment, I'm going through the first three ones: the content, the process, and the product. When it comes to the content, so it's actually the reading materials, or the variety of the readability of the level of the instruction the teacher is giving to the students. For example, you're pushing materials on the tape, using some spelling or vocabulary activities, vocabulary lists, and make sure that the students have got the full readiness in order to do a similar practice. I've got another guest who's joining. Yeah, as I said, and at the same time, it is what, so the meaning of the content exactly refers to the students' needs on the way how to learn and on the way how they get access to the information. This is the most important thing. The students and the way how they learn and the way how they get access to the information. Whereas when it comes to process, it is actually the activities in which the students they got getting engaged in order to get or to make sense for the mastery of some content, for the mastery of some information, for the mastery of an instruction that the teacher is giving. So all of the first three I've mentioned, they've got a very big relation, a very inter-campaigned relation to the products. The products is actually the culminating apply, or the culminating project, or the sequence that the teacher is going to ask the students to use. It's kind of the activity or the knowledge or the task that the teacher is dividing or instructing the students and conveying them to do or to understand or to rehearse in a way that it permits them to apply it and to extend it to whatever level they think, and apply it certainly to a very specific, if I may say, real life situation. And that's that's the reason actually why most of the times we've spoken about the syllabus, the problems with the syllabus, and how to cope with a long-term or long-sized syllabus. Just just to sum it up, as you see here, the PIAC, exactly the PIAC. This is to refer exactly to the way the differentiated instruction is used for. So a teacher normally should be very proactive, and they often involve the group work. They often make sure that they listen to the students and they just get to them in a more formative assessment way to test their knowledge or to test the practicality of their understanding. At the same time, they should have, or they most of the time need to make sure that they have some multiple activities and some multiple assessments which should get student-centered and not teacher-centered. When it comes to maximizing the learning of all the students, I would at the very beginning like to mention why do we use, or why is the differentiated instruction used as a module in teaching. The differentiated instruction actually, it shakes up as a normal traditional, let's say, term lesson. It gets just multiple options for taking the information and making sense of the ideas, and at the same time gets the student to express what they are learning. So some time ago, let's say in the past, there was something called the individualized instruction module. So this is actually something which is old-fashioned and no longer used, but still in some of the cases we as teachers might be exposed to fall in that trap of the individualized instruction, which means that the teachers, they just they discover the creation of the individual learning plan. They apply it as per their understanding. They apply it as for equitable tasks, as well as their known several approaches and learning approaches. But certainly it doesn't require any individual approach for the students, which means that the only reason why we do use the differentiated instruction is that to get the teaching, the module actually, from teacher-centered step to the learner-centered step. So, and as long as we get there, so when the learners are the most important center of the module, of the learning process, At this case, we will be able to see or to discover the opportunities. We will be able to discover the diversity we've got in our classes. When I say diversity or diversity, I do not mean the race, I do not mean the social background, but I really mean the needs, or I mean the skills, the competencies we've got in our classes. So before I got to the maximization of the learning process, anyone has got a question, please? Okay, sounds that no one has got a question. So another question: what does maximization of the learning process to the students? Anyone to give us what he or she thinks about the way we maximize the learning for our students? Certainly related to your experience, related to your English language teaching knowledge. Okay. Anyone there?
Sorry, Hicham.
Hello?
Sorry, I said, could you please repeat your question?
Oh yeah, certainly. I said so. Relying on your experience as a teacher, what would you mean generally by the maximization of the learning processes to all our students?
Okay, I may say to meet all the learners' needs, and interest and levels.
Hello?
In other words, it's to make our instructions or to design instructions and make them as smart as our learning objectives.
Hello?
Hello, thank you. Sam, go ahead, please. I see that Iman, right?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, we do hear you. Go
this
ahead.
is Ismahan. So what I have just understood that meeting student differences is challenging since these differences can be related to a large variety of student characteristics, such as learners' interests, learning styles, their cultural background, their language level, their attitudes, etc. And in the same way, there is a large the teachers put different learners in different groups according to their level, interests, etc., and present different set of exercises, such as giving more support and feedback to struggling such reader and provide enrichment materials. Thank you.
Isman, thank you so much. Exactly. Well, I'm going to go through the points, through the dive you one by one, starting by the very small one, readiness. When we talk about readiness in the maximizing the learning of all our students, this refers to the students' knowledge and the skills regarding any given content, which may vary across the subjects and across the content areas of the student. A student or student's readiness may be influenced in most of the times by either their background knowledge, by life experience, by the prior learning, by even the teacher's presence, let's say the teacher's presence and the teacher presentation. So really getting to understand the student's readiness in relation to their life experience, in relation to their level, of course, in relation to their prior learning is extremely important, so that we could, as teachers, put a certain of a boosting process to their understanding, a boosting process to their learning. This is in relation to the interest. It's also related to the students, and this refers to the topics, to the skills, and to the activities that pique the students' curiosity, that pique the students' attention, or inspire their norm in general. So teachers here, they can discover the students' interest by determining some topics that the students enjoy, or by determining some activities they engage outside or inside the class. So you can also engage your students by just giving them some very creative homework, which really gets them to a very high level of their attention and raises their curiosity. So this is one of the things as well that really permits the teacher the easifying process of using the differentiated instruction. Whereas when it comes to the learning profile, this is what I mentioned on a slide before, is that the student's preferred method of learning new information or learning a new skill and the environmental factor that influence it, that learning. So here the students, or the learning profile of the students, really gets over the way the students is learning a new information or a new skill or a new activity, just being influenced by some particular factors. When I say environmental factors, that could be actually the class, that could be the colleagues, that could be the social background, that could be even the student's profile, physically or mentally. Students' profile generally can also be influenced by some identity or cultural aspects. That's what I've mentioned before. But this is not a very important point to mention. Then, as you see on the right side here, when we talk about these 5 elements: flexibility, variable grouping, collaboration, assessment, and equitable tasks. So these are as well some maximizing means, so that we can really get to be able to use in a very effective way the differentiated instruction in our classrooms, or we call it the differentiated classroom. And later on, by the end of this slide, we will be able as well to see some key differences between the differentiated classroom and the traditional classroom. That's what I mentioned before as the individualized approach. So talking about flexibility of the teacher means that the demonstration of the clarity about the learning goals, the demonstration that, or let's say the focus that the students understand the time, understand the materials, understand the moods and the instructions, they are grouped, or the way they are being instructed, mainly the ways expressing the learning needs, ways expressing the learning abilities, and the ways of assessing the learning. So here it covers lots of points, not only one. It covers at the very beginning the learning goals, and it covers the understanding, it covers the time and the materials, and the moods of instructions, as well as the ways the teacher is grouping the students. That is to say that a teacher, when he tends or when she tends to assess the learning, there are some key elements or some tools that really can be used in a variety of ways, just in order to promote some individual whole class success or some individual attention, just by tending or just accessing a way to assess your students. So sometimes even assessment is a way of making students learn. I see Lombardi has got problems. She's logging in and logging out. Okay, anyone has got a question about flexibility?
Hi again.
Hi, Ismahan, go ahead, please.
I have a question concerning DI. Is it possible to allow students to work alone instead of in group setting? Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. That's exactly differs on the interest. As you see, I've mentioned it. So the student's interest, the student's attention is actually the most favorable factor that the teacher can be impacted by, which means that depending on the student's attention, depending on the student's capabilities, the teacher should be as well having a certain flexibility to make students either working alone, in pairs or in groups. But we need really to make sure that, as I said, the interest of the students, the topic, the skills, and the activities that are going to pick the students' curiosity and the students' attention are respected in a way or in another. Anyone has got another question? Okay, seems that no one has got a question. Then going to assessment, as you see, that's another important information we need to make sure that we understand before we tend ever to maximize the students' needs or the students' learnings, or even we get to think to start applying the differentiated instruction in our classroom. So the assessment actually refers to the differences of the students, and we all know as teachers that differences students' levels are normally expected and should be appreciated and studied in a way that a teacher needs to understand the way the levels are classified, or the way of his students or her students have got a certain safety of their levels or of their capabilities of the learning. So teachers generally, they should recognize where the students are relative to some learning goals or to some indicated kind of performance parameters, and this is what is referred to as the formative and the summative assessment. So here the teachers, they should recognize everything the student said or the students do or the students work on, the students apply, and at the same time they should create some useful information to make sure that the students have got some clarified understanding of their learning, the crafting of their learning, and as well they understand the way we assess them. So if we say to the students, yes, you are doing a good job and you've got 100% over your performance, we should also explain some factors, we should explain some accomplishments and some achievements that those students have done. And the assessment really differs between between being formative, between being summative, and it depends on the capabilities, it depends on the learning ability you've got in your classes. And as far as I know, in the classes you're teaching in Algeria, most of them, they are very large sized, so over 30 students, over 35 students, except language schools. So I bet this is actually an opportunity for a teacher to discover a very big number of language skills or learning abilities. Anyone has got a question, please? Okay, when it comes to variable grouping, so here I guess the question of Ismahan some times ago. So the teachers in the differentiated classroom, they should utilize the whole class. They should be able to make small groups, big groups. They should make sure that some activities are also of an individual explorations. And as well, the students, they may work with peers, they may manifest some similar academic needs together, in independence to the level, independence to the abilities they've got. At other points, students of mixed readiness, they work together, maybe in groups. We need to sort of respect some settings which really draw the strength of students. So an example is that sometimes the students, when they work with their classmates who have similar interests or have similar maybe learning abilities or style or in some situations, so the students, they get more to collaborate, they get more a stylish way to understand the things twice. Understanding the way they do, themselves, and at the same time understanding the way the second part or their peer is working with. It's a second thought, it's another way, it's another opinion. So for them, it's really something motivating. And by the end, what I can say about variable grouping, since this is actually one of the things a teacher really needs to understand, is that students themselves, sometimes they decide on their work groups. So it really depends on their desire of arrangements, on their desire of decision. We sometimes as teachers need also to respect those desires. So if students, they just agree all together, they need to work in some particular groups. Supposing they choose their own groups, they form their own classes. At this time, the teacher just needs to give the chance to students to discover their abilities and to exchange the information and the learning processes the way they want to do. Whereas sometimes, of course, in accordance to our curriculum, in accordance to our syllabus, we need to make sure that we divide the students in certain level groups, in certain labelized groups, so that we make sure that the abilities or the learning levels are set in a way sustainable and equal, so that we don't get kind of people marginalized or some students who kind of are with a little bit higher level than the others are working together, whereas the performance is going to be certainly different and there is kind of an cut over there. This is in relation to the equitable tasks, and having some way that the learners, they may have some tasks which are engaging, which provide some equitable access to some essential understanding, and as well as the skills. So in our classes, each student needs to feel that they are challenged. Well, challenged not a social challenge, but we're talking about an academic challenge. Which means that they need to find the work they are doing or the activity the teacher is assigning to them a little bit appealing. They need to grapple some necessary information and principles, and at the same time, they need to be able to use the skills we teach them. So, me as a teacher, I cannot give an activity which requires some skills that I did not teach to my students. And this is one of the things we see, unfortunately, in our syllabus programs, in our syllabus sequences. I'm not talking about the context of Algeria, but in most of the times, lots of syllabus, let's say, organizing institutions, they fall in this trap by trying to discover some new skills, by trying to promote some new skills for the students, whereas those skills are not part of the teaching and the learning process to the students, which means that students sometimes may be assessed for some activities or for some tasks which require a certain skill, and this skill is not actually mentioned to be taught, or this skill is not mentioned to be deduced over a certain sequence or over a certain lesson. And this is the reason why the differentiated instruction does some presume and some different tasks, just why in order for each learner to find a certain flexibility in the task, in the complexity, in the working arrangements, as well as in the moods and the learning expressions of the students. And here we can see really the benefit of using a differentiated instruction module and the power of the teacher, the way they understand the students' abilities. And here, just to sum it up over collaboration, I've said it the last one. The teacher are going certainly for a certain level after every lesson, after every sequence, after every week, to diagnose and prescribe some learning needs. Of course, they are actually the supervisors and they can see what the students like exactly. And they are going to facilitate the learning. They are going to craft some effective curricula to this, so that students, they get their critical classroom success. What it means that the differentiated instruction covers two parties, the teacher's party and the student's party. The students are very important in collaborating with the teacher, so that the teacher will be able to do kind of a momentum or a cycle end in order to make some choices very enhancing to their students, in order to promote some skills, in order to promote some student needs. And at the same time, the teacher is playing a great role here just by identifying the variety of the skills, the variety of the learning processes. I see someone who has joined, Lombarkia, she's joining again. Maybe she has got a problem with joining. Okay, that's not a big deal. As I said before, so just to sum up the last point, which is collaboration here, is that the teachers, they need to study their students continually. They need to involve them in decision making about their classroom activities, about their classroom assessments, and they need to consider both as complementary features of a certain learning process. So the differentiated classroom is not possible to be applied without the collaboration of the teachers, along with the one of the students, and vice versa. And as you see here, just not to go in lots of details in only one slide, I would go with the three first examples. In the differentiated classroom, we see the differences of the learning styles are studied as a basis for planning, which means that the teacher is going to consider every single difference as a plan of improvement or as a plan of application. Certainly what all the students are going to get benefit of, whereas in the traditional class, the differences were just marked or addressed as a problematic or if problematic, which means that the teacher is going to deal with differences and various learning abilities only if this variety is going to cause a problem. So in the case it doesn't cause a problem, or in the case he does not recognize that it makes a problem, he would not or she would not interfere into making that change or into making that plan for that. The same for assessment. Assessment is going or is ongoing and diagnostic. Assessment means ongoing. It means it's being done on a daily basis or on a lesson basis very frequently. Whereas in this traditional classroom, the assessment is most common at the end of the learning, which means that the teacher is doing a certain assessment only by the end of a certain trimester or semester, or even by the end of the year. Then the third example is that the focus on multiple forms of intelligence is very evident. Whereas in the traditional classroom, it's just relatively narrow sense of intelligence prevails, which means that the teacher, when it comes to differentiated classroom, the focus on the multiple forms of intelligence is very evident. It means it's very practical. It's actually one of the best practices you need to do, or you need to have actually installed, you need to have applied in your daily activities if you are using the differentiated classroom. But in the past, people, or sometimes even people now who are still using the traditional, or are still working with the traditional classroom, it's just kind of some narrow and some sense of intelligence, just a sense that prevails in its time, which does not have really a certain rank, a certain procedural process to be understood or to be kind of one of the top priorities as a best practice for the teachers. Anyone has got a question before I move to the next slide? Okay, seems that no one has got a question. To sum up, so that I can tackle the inclusive or the inclusive teaching, the goal of the differentiated education generally is only to ensure that all the students learning in a way, let's say in the same classroom, in a way regardless of their different abilities, regardless of their academic readiness, they've got an equitable access to educational opportunities, and they've got an educational kind of resources which are going to meet their needs as students through a certain learning process. And this is also holds the teachers let's say, from really getting over the students to consider some important points. And one of these points, which I'm going to discuss now, is the inclusive teaching or the inclusive teaching. A question: what do you know about inclusive teaching? Any one of you? Any information, any idea you've got about the inclusive teaching? Or what it does mean for you as a teacher? I mean, it comes from the word inclusion. Okay, maybe another way to ask the question is that how do you include several methods and several opportunities to your learners while you are teaching? Okay. Generally, inclusive education is defined and is standard. It does not really differ when it comes to teaching, when it comes to teaching in some business companies, when it comes to teaching military people, when it comes to teaching medical information. It's absolutely the same. And it is defined as a learning environment that promotes a full personal, academic, and professional development for all the learners, irrespective of some race, class, color, gender, disability, sexual preference, learning styles, or even the language. So it's really exactly the way we've been speaking about the differentiated instruction, but this means that you need to include all the learning profiles, or it needs to include all the learning individualities in regardless to the color, in regardless to the prior learning, in regardless to the disability, even to the learning ability every student could have. And this slide is actually to grab the attention of the teachers who are present here to consider some very basic information which we know, which we deal with every single day, but sometimes we miss and we fall in the trap of forgetting them. Things you need to ask yourself as a teacher about is that how might your own cultural bound assumption influence your interaction with your students? Or you get to ask yourself, how might the backgrounds and the experiences of my students influence their motivation, influence their inclusion and the engagement in their classes? Or maybe you can ask as well how you could modify the course materials so that you would be able to meet their needs, so that you would be able to raise their attention and develop a certain curiosity of their level. It's very easy. We've got 5 points, we've got 5 elements we as teachers need to consider. As you see, age and gender. We don't have to think of students who are older than others, of saying that maybe girls, they are a little bit more intelligent than boys, or saying that, let's say, generally the female aspect is a little bit more inclusive, is a little bit more trendy, more fancy of learning rather than the one of the males. This is absolutely something we as teachers do not need to focus on, do not need even to consider. The same as for race and the background. We in Algeria have got this actually this notion, and we can really give real examples, saying that people would come from the desert, from Sahara. They come to study in the Middle East, or they come to study in the center of Algeria, in the north, in the west, in the east, whatever. Teachers, some of us maybe would think that their background or their race, because being in a culture in which the second language or a foreign language is not given that much interest than the other one, is going to make some differences. This is absolutely not the case. The students, they've got a certain power. We as teachers do not know on the way how they grow up, on the way how they make their learning abilities develop, on the way they can just put a certain attention, they can put a certain curiosity with some effort of engagement to any learning process or any learning activity the teacher is going to set for the students. So things really, we never need to consider the race or the background in relation to the capabilities, in relation to the possible learning experience for the students. The same for the physical and the mental status. We do not have to think of that because every student or every child is different than the other one in terms of the learning capabilities of perception, of perceiving an information, or in terms of the delivery. So if we talk about physical and mental status, we could see a real difference, absolutely. But we need as well to make sure that there is a difference only in the delivery. Maybe people or students who have got some mental status issues, they would have a different way of delivering their understanding of the knowledge, their understanding of a certain activity, and the same for the physicals, for the physical issues. So we do not have to consider these problems. We need also to give the chance to the students to make us understand the way they can deliver the information, the way they can deliver their engagement and their understanding. And this is why I mentioned before the collaboration. Two parties, the teacher and the students. If both do not collaborate in a way, they open spaces for the learning experiences, they open spaces for some individual strength and some contribution that is going to make the learning experience richer. At that case, it's a little bit hard to understand or to be able to apply effectively the differentiated instruction. Then the opportunities and needs, that's what we've mentioned as well before in terms of we need to give the students the opportunities. We need also to respond to their needs. We need to make them part of those opportunities. So they are part of creation or the creativity of a certain model of our classes. So the more we give them opportunities, the more we're going to be able to understand their needs, the more we see the way they deliver, the way they engage, the way they've got a certain perception of an information and they transfer it to an application module in the learning processes. Later on, the benefits and the adoption, this really differs from one country to another. It differs from one school to another. I don't know if you've got it in your schools or no, but I just wanted to mention it, that the more we give student benefits, it's not when I say benefits and adoption, it goes to money, it goes to some trips. Now, benefits in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the accessibility of the learning, in terms of the typhy, and the learning benefit in general. Not only students, they go to study 1 hour of English language, then they go home, then absolutely that's the end. Whereas the teacher or the institution in general needs to create some benefit platforms for the students in order to earn badges, for example, to earn certain reward, even it's virtual reward, but it absolutely makes difference. It absolutely makes the students engaged and more to perform effectively. Anyone has got a question before we carry on? Hello, anyone has got a question?
Hi there. I want to just add a point about how to make our pupils accept the differentiation inside their classroom. Here, the teacher should establish a sphere of interculturality. It means, as teachers, we can help our students activate their antennas by making them aware of the important elements of their own culture and helping them understand how their culture has shaped them. Here, we have to install the values. They have to love their culture, to accept it, to respect it, love it, and then why? To respect the others. When we respect the others, we accept the others, it means we It means we are open. We are open to the others. We accept the others and we accept the differentiation. So as teachers also we need to make sure that we use different lessons to cater for different kinds of students' preferences. We might use visual, for example, stimulus in one lesson today, but rely on another material for the next day. We should give or promote our students with exercises, with a variety of exercises for a variety of exercises for our learners. And balance them with more holistic or let's say global communicative activities at other times. Also, I have point what I want to add is that we should keep as a solution. Yeah, we should keep a record of what kinds of activities are successful with which kinds of students, so that we can make effective future decisions for our future lessons, of course. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Was that Iman, right?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, thank you, Iman. It really makes sense what you said. It really gives a clear understanding to the sense of the beginning of these three elements I'm going to mention: the content, the process, and the product. Because they are the most familiar to educators, we as teachers, in terms of planning, in terms of instructions. So I'm going to ask maybe the same questions you've asked. As a teacher, we need to understand, or we need to ask, what do students need to know, or what they do need to understand? Or how will the students demonstrate that they have learned or they have not learned? Or what will do the students in case they fail? What will do the students in case they get promoted or in case they get a good job? So all of this information, despite all the challenges, despite all the learning abilities we've got in our classes, instruction generally begins with the learner through some process, which is readiness, interest, and learning preferences. The three. So as you see, the learner voice, and the access. So these 3 points: readiness, interest, and learning preferences. I've all even explained them in a way, kind of, in other words, this is the current skill level, which means how the students are ready to acquire something. Then the interest, it's actually the choices and the backgrounds, that what Iman mentioned a while ago, exactly about what activities work for students, what not, and what activities work for a group of students, and what activities work for another group of students. And later on, the learning preferences, it means the way of thinking, the way the students, they think or they get engaged in relation or independence, certainly to their capacity, to their language skills, to their understanding. Yes, so just to really sum it up, the student is the best equipped person, is the best equipped creature, just in order to make the connections or to determine whether the lesson is the best for them or not. When I say is the best for them, is not to accept it, but in terms of learning, if really suits their needs, the lesson, which means the instruction or the way the teacher is conveying the information to the students. Students actually, they usually do this all the time through some expressions, through some engagement, through some disengagement, through some agreement, through participation. And we really need to understand that what motivates the learners to participate is not only what the teacher is giving to them as information, something very accessible, something they really like, but also what is really engaging them to dedicate some special energy to that lesson. What is really going to come from them. So if I really do something to the students, I teach them something, I also expect a certain level of delivery. I expect a certain return from those students. It means they're going to apply what I've taught them, whether in the class, whether in real life situation, whether to be assessed, whether to do some project or some activity. Generally, I most of the time say this even to my colleagues, I say even to myself, that the solution for me as a teacher just in order to make a very conscious decision to communicate and collaborate with my students, is to include them in my planning and in my decision-making learning processes. This is what I really count on most of the time, just to find a better solution in the way I deal with the diverse learners and the mixed ability classes. I don't know if you've got the same opinion. I don't know if you've got the same idea with me. But yes, I'm very happy if I listened something from you.
Yes, hi, I'm Iman again. So we need to choose, in fact, I agree with you, sir. We need to choose appropriate tasks and language for students at different levels. So as teachers, we won't expect beginners, for example, to discuss complex issues, and we won't ask advanced students to do simple language drill, for example. So even our expectations should be logical. For example, I'm dealing with the read lessons. I have different sub skills. I would not expect that all my learners should do all the tasks from A to Z. So some learners are able to do, for example, A, B, C. The others can deal just with the Lexis, and that's it. So the teacher should not expect that all the learners are going to deal with all our activities at the same way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, man. Exactly. And this is a reason, actually, I would like to add this, maybe this information. Whenever a teacher needs to prepare a lecture and a question, an assignment, let's say some question scenarios, case studies, assignments, or exams, we really need to select the topics in the materials that are going to reflect the contribution and the perspective of the groups in the class, and at the same time they're going to be proving some underrepresented in the field. So you cannot select anything you want. You cannot select anything you find in your curriculum, but you need to select exactly what is going to suit your students' levels, and at the same time these levels are going to be part of a certain selection by a previous experience, by some historically collections of the field over and over, and after that you're just going to be having a very open module or a very open model of new ideas, of new experiences, of new acquisition of the language skills. Okay, anyone else has got a question before I move to the last slide, actually? We are over time, but just remember that we've started a little bit late. We've been waiting for some people to join over. So this is a recapitulative slide, which is going to cover the strategy. When I say strategy, it's not strategies on how to apply the differentiated instruction in your classrooms, because this is already something we've discussed in the previous slides. But strategy means actually the actual perception of the teachers, the actual environment or the actual atmosphere we feel when we are at classes, or the parents feel when they send their students to schools, or students when they are over in their school, how they feel, how they perceive lots of things, not only the teaching. As you see, the example I've made about just close to the strategy. Why do children go to school? So most of the people, they would say it's to learn the 3 R's, actually the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic. Some parents, they say, just I would like to get rid of my kids. I want to stay, let's say, in peace home. I want to have some rest. Some parents, they say, okay, I want my guys or my children to be a pilot, when a doctor, when a teacher, whatever. But a school culture in general that is going to promote a certain diversity, a certain classroom models, is going to be teaching the students something that's more important than the language skills. then the reading, then the writing, then the speaking, then the listening. It's the how to live and to work in a society where every individual is unique. And this is the reason in our classes they are mixed. They are females and males, different abilities, different and mixed competencies. The thing here is that the students are going to learn on how to deal in different world, in a diverse world, even at work, even with teachers, when they grow up, when they class, when doing activities, when working in an exam. There is absolutely no difference. But the main task here is that the learning model. And I've mentioned some examples down, as you see, include the diverse content materials. So these actually elements, they refer to the syllabus. I've seen the syllabus, let's say part of it, of the teachers, I guess some of the middle schools. I'm not going to mention the level. I've seen the one of the high school. I've seen the one of the university. Certainly I'm talking about the Algerian context. And I've come out to add these points, really. Whenever we are teaching a lesson, we are teaching a skill, we are teaching a model, we are teaching a notion dive, we need to include diverse content. We need to include materials and ideas which are going to cover all your students' abilities, which means that every single person in your class will be able to understand, will be able to raise his or her hand, will be able to contribute, will be able to say a word, will be able to make a project. And this is what we lack. Most of the items of our syllabus courses, they lack certain diversity, they lack a certain content mixture, so that all the students are going to be able to take part of that class. And the same for the inclusive environment. I've seen that most of the activities, kind of 95% of the activities, they cover only a certain skill or a certain merge, a certain pair of skills, whilst in general, every single lesson needs to cover a certain inclusivity, a certain including process, so that all the students will be able to understand, all the students will be able to take benefit from the learning part. Okay, here is to say that the teacher has got a certain freedom to shape their lesson plans, to shape their learning, to choose a certain method, a certain module to teach with. Like, for example, you are free to teach whether in the individualized approach or you choose the differentiated approach, the differentiated instruction. It's really up to you. But just make sure that by the end, every single person, every single student in your class has understood at least a certain percentage, and this is actually what you're going to work with, the understanding rate of your students. Later on, encouraging the growth of the mindset. This is one of the things that it's very, very important, the teacher, to encourage the growth of the mindset, the understanding of the different skills, the understanding of being unique and being different at the same time. One student is being different than the other. Understanding the students, or making sure that the students understand that there could not be a very effective, 100% effective learning process if there is not a certain mixed ability in the class. And these are things really the students need to understand, so that they can contribute to each other's work, they can contribute to each other's groups or to each other's projects, whatever. Later on, striving for equality of access to instruction and assistance. And this is, I said, maybe it really lacks in some of our schools. I understand the accessibility to the information, the accessibility to the promotion of the learning, whether via the web platforms, whether the virtual platforms. For example, I see at these very weird classes, lots of students, I say 80% of our students, they did not have any chance to carry on their studies, to carry on their learning, objectives that I've said at the very beginning of the lesson. They were just stuck. They did not have this accessibility, and this is very, very unfortunate for us to see that we are not able, certainly, to afford a certain amount of effort, certain level of money in order to cover all of these problems. But as a teacher is able also to create, as I said, when things are on, when things are active, when life is back to normal, to create a certain strive of access to instructions, information. This is by homework, and homework, as I said, really they can be very engaging, they can be very creative. So as homework pieces are not part of a certain module or a certain policy in your curriculum, papers, you absolutely have to feel free to give any kind of homework you want to your students. You can take a very, very big level, you can take a very big perspective to assign homework pieces to the children, to the students, and I'm sure that you're going to get benefit over that. Anyone would like to add something, please?
Sorry, Hicham, this is Ibtisam. I just wanted to make sure that I got what you have said. When you talked about including diverse content, materials, and ideas, is it about when I have, for example, the syllabus, so I have to choose whether to adopt its content and use it in class, or to adapt it, change it, and make it fit my learners' needs and levels, and even a way of thinking which differs and related to the environment and to their environment and their age and gender, so on and so forth.
Maybe the second one. Yes, it's really you understand it, you prepare it, but you just need to make sure that it fits your learning, your learners' needs. This is one. At the same time, you can make any changes for it. If we have got lots of lessons, we have got lots of classes where there is absolutely kind of an inner or indirect objective of known diversity models, and I saw that in so many object courses before. So as I said, you really feel free to change it, you really feel free to reshape it the way it suits your students' needs. You absolutely have to feel free. As long as it's going to serve for the same objective, then you can do it.
Hello? Can I answer?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello?
Go ahead, Ismahan. Go ahead, yes.
Can I answer Ibtisam's question, please?
Oh, absolutely. If you do my job, then I would be happy.
I think teachers can present varying learning objectives and different content, as well as adopt different modes of assessment to meet the needs of each student. Thank you.
Thank you. Ibtisam, you got two questions. Sorry, two answers actually to your question. I don't know if that's enough for you. You want more?
No, thank you for both of you.
Absolutely. Anyone else has got a question, has got something to add? Okay, so if no one, hello.
Hi, may I add something, please?
Please go ahead.
Okay. All what you have said, I think I have something to add. I think teacher doesn't need to teach, but rather to coach, to monitor, and most importantly, to inspire. As Albert Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts and knowledge, but the training of the mind to think. For example, as taking the past knowledge or the prior knowledge of the student and connect them to the new knowledge. As a teacher, this can help me to listen to my students thinking well. Also, for example, I love learning, but my students don't love it. So here, students love having choices. So let's have them to get their choices. By choice, I mean a situation where many students or many, activities are available to students and according to their based on learning styles. Thank you.
Well, absolutely. I strongly agree. I strongly agree. Thank you, Ismail. Anyone else has got something to add? Okay, if no one, then I would like to thank you very much for your attention and for your time you afforded to attend this webinar, for the information all of you shared with me and with the participants. Yes, if you've got any question, you can still ask before we wrap up the webinar. Otherwise, I just wish you a very nice rest of the day and looking forward to meeting you in our upcoming event, which is on the 2nd of July, same time and the same day. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you very much, Hicham. Thanks also to all the